In this segment, I'm going to take a look at the standard toolbar, which is found up here at the top of your workspace, basically just underneath the drop-down menus. And a lot of the tools that are found on your standard toolbar are also found in the drop-down menus, and so we've already covered in different parts of this video many of these tools, and I'll just highlight the tool names and I'll review some of them as it seems appropriate. So starting on the left of the standard toolbar, we have New Design, Open Design, and Read from a floppy diskette. Then we've got Save to your hard drive and Write to a floppy diskette. And I did a good job of reviewing and showing how to use those tools in one of the first segments of the video, so I won't bother to show how to use those again. The next tool we have is the print option, and basically this is how you're going to print your run sheets. It'll take you to the print preview options, and you can decide how you want to view your design and print it out. Now next to that we've got the cut, copy, and paste, and you'll notice that cut and copy are gray right now, and whenever something's gray in a design, it basically means, or in your embroidery software, it means that you'll need to do something first before you can use that tool. And in this case, I can't use the cut or copy tool until I first select an object in the design, and I would need to use the select tool. So I'll just make sure I have my select tool turned on, and I can either click to select an object, or I could drag a box to select what would be, multiple objects. Now that I've got all of this scroll work on the right selected, you'll notice now that the cut and the copy features are also available. And so, for example, if I choose cut, it'll remove all of those objects from the design. And it actually puts them on an imaginary clipboard, which I could then use to paste the designs back down. So I could paste that object and put it back in the design. I could even paste again and have a second copy of it if I wanted to. So that's how cut and copy work. Cut basically removes something from the design. Copy makes a copy of it on your clipboard but does not remove it. And next to cut, copy, and paste, I have the undo and the redo buttons. And so, for example, if I use undo, it'll get rid of the it'll take, I guess I moved those objects. If I go undo again, it'll get rid of the second copy of those objects. If I said undo again, it would remove those again because that was the when I had cut them out. And if I say undo again, it'll put them back to where they were before I cut them out. So undo is like going backwards one step at a time for the changes that you've made in your design, and the opposite would be redo, which will then go forward through the steps or the transformations that you may have recently done in your design. So if I say redo, it's going to cut that back out again. Undo puts it back again. So now next to undo and redo, we have our zoom option, and basically this tells you can go to a specific zoom size. So if I chose from the menu 200, it'll zoom in on my design at the ratio of 200, so basically twice as large as the actual embroidery. And I could choose, for example, 100, and that'll take me to the actual size. And I also have my mouse set up with a scroll wheel in the middle of the mouse, and when I use my wheel, my artwork, my design will scroll in and out. So if I scroll up, it goes in. If I scroll out, it comes back. But that doesn't tell me a specific percentage. I don't always know exactly what size I'm looking at, my actual size of my embroidery. So that's what this is for. You can find out what's it look like actually look at 100% or whatever. So now next to the zoom option, we have Unselect, Select All, and Invert Selection tool. And so just as an example, if I choose Select All, everything in the design gets selected, all objects. If I choose Unselect, it lets go. If I drag a box and select, for example, all of these objects in this right-hand scroll, and then I choose the Invert Selection tool, it unselects the objects that I had selected, and it selects all of the objects that were not selected. So that means it's a way of switching. What you are selected becomes unselected and everything else becomes selected. So you can switch your selection, and I can click on it again to go backwards. So it's each time I click it, it'll invert the selection. And if I just don't want to select, I can use the unselect button. You can also, by the way, when you click on an object, that will select it. And if I just click on the empty desktop, it will unselect it. Okay, so next to the selecting tools, we have the show and hide tool. And again, they're currently grayed out. So basically what that means is if I want to use them, I need to have something selected first. So I'll go ahead and drag a box and select this right-hand scroll. And so now you'll see the hide objects tool has become available. And if I choose that now, it hides all of the stitches and objects for that right-hand scroll. They're not actually removed from the design. They're still part of the design. They're just hidden from our view. They're not selectable. They're not editable. But if at any time I could click on the show button and it'll bring them back and shows all objects. So that can be really helpful when you're working on a design that has multiple layers and you're just trying to see something that has embroidery on top of it. You can simply select the areas that you don't want to see and hide them. Now next to that, we have a bit of a traveling tool. And so this, for example, will help you travel through the objects of a design. And the options are to jump to the start of the design, or go previous object, or go previous stitch, or we have go forward to the next stitch, or go to the next object, or go to the end of the design. So if I choose the beginning of the design, it automatically selects the very first object in this design. And if I choose the end design, it automatically selects the last object in the design. I'll jump back to the beginning and then show that I could jump to the next object with this arrow here. So it goes through, and each time I click the option, it goes to the next object, and to the next object, and to the next object. So that's a way that you can easily see, travel through your design to see what the order of the objects is in your design. And you can go backwards the same way, to the previous object, to the previous object, to the previous object. Now, the other two options in here relate to actually editing and selecting stitches, and that's something we haven't really talked about in this video yet, but we've reached the time where it's sort of time to start talking about that. So you'll notice I'm just going to divert for a moment and talk a little bit about the left-hand toolbar, which I'll be covering shortly in the video. Right now we're set on what's known as the transform tool. In other words, my arrow allows me to click and select an object. And once I have an object selected, I can move it or resize it. And when I do, what's happening is I'm selecting objects. And the opposite is, here on the left hand, is edit stitches. So now before I start editing stitches, I'm going to use my undo, 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 just to put that back. Now I'm going to choose the edit stitches option. And what I'm going to do is zoom in very closely on this design and show that when I have the edit stitches option turned on, I can actually mouse over, and notice what happens when I come over the stitches. It highlights the stitches, and I can actually select, I'm going to select this exact stitch right there. And so you can see, just as an example, once I have a stitch selected, I could click and drag and move that stitch to a new location. I can also insert stitches and delete stitches, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But just to continue back along the standard toolbar, so I've selected a stitch now, and the option is go to the next stitch, go to the next stitch, go to the next stitch, or go to the previous stitch. So that's what this traveling toolbar is all about. And just continuing along with the standard toolbar, next to that we have some viewing options, and the first one is show stitch marks. So if I turn that on, you'll notice that it gives me a nice little circle around every single stitch in the design. Every single needle penetration of the fabric is highlighted with a circle, and I could easily select any one of those stitches just by clicking on it. Now, the next option is called Show Up to Cursor. And I'm going to go ahead and click that, and you'll see what happens. So Show Up to Cursor basically says, show me all the stitches that have already been stitched up to my cursor, which means up to the stitch that I've selected. And it basically hides all of the stitches that come after that stitch. So if I zoom out, you can see that I had selected that stitch, and everything that was prior to that stitch is not, or is shown, and everything that would show after that stitch is hidden. Now if I click on the option again, it'll show all the stitches. So just to do that, review that one more time, I'll zoom in closely, and this time I'm going to select one of the stitches from the underlay. Then I'll zoom out, and I'm going to choose that Show Up to Cursor, and you can see that it took out all of the stitches on top, and it just shows me the stitches up to my cursor. And remember, I have the stitch selected. I could move it if I wanted to, or whatever. Now, when I click on this button again, it shows me all the stitches in my design. So that's a different way of viewing your designs. So you got the show marks, show stitch marks, show up to cursor. Now the next one, show filled outlines, and this is going to be something that because I'm currently looking at a Jeff file that I had created, a stitch file that was from one of my workshops, I don't have any filled objects. This is just stitches. So what that means is I'm just going to use the window drop down menu and go to the untitled design of the star that I'd been looking at previously, and perhaps what we'll do is just select the outline of that star and move it over. So notice when I move it over, the option is show filled outline. So if I turn that on, it puts a sort of like a colored shaded area behind my stitches. I'll zoom in a little closer and then turn it off so you can see when it's off, it just shows the stitches. When I turn it back on again, it shows the stitches, but it also shows a bit of a color to represent where the area that I filled in is. So that's what that's about. And we didn't see that when working on the butterfly design because this was just a Jeff file that I didn't create using the Artistic Sewing Suite. There's no vector, filled objects with colors like that. There's just stitches. So that's why we don't have, this tool does nothing for us on this design. Now, next to those viewing tools, we have our slow redraw feature. And so maybe I'll just zoom out to look at the slow redraw, and I'll zoom in a little closer. So something like this. Now if I choose slow redraw, it gives me, first of all, I have the speed option, and I have a slider that I can choose how fast do I want it to slow redraw. And then basically I have a start and a stop option. So if I say start, it starts sewing, and it actually started sewing right at the stitch that I had selected because we were in stitch editing mode. But if I zoom in on this, you can see that it's actually sewing my design. Now I could slow that down to a very sort of slower, well, not that slow, 1200 stitches per second, or like 1200 RPM, or I could speed it up. So that's your ability to decide how quickly you want to see your slow redraw work. Now when I push stop, it's going to complete the design, and I can just close the slow redraw window at any time. So that's your slow redraw option. And the last tool found on the standard toolbar is your design information. And when you open up your design information, you get the window that includes all of the things that are specific to this design. And so you can add information like the date and the fabric. You could put in some summary information like the customer's name, or give some keywords to help you find designs later on, like maybe I could put butterfly or scroll in here. Under your yarn, it tells you information about the thread that you've got, and excuse me. Anyways, I reviewed the design information in a previous segment, but that's one more way to access that design information is through the standard toolbar. So that's a quick review of all of the different tools and functions found on the standard toolbar.